So, hello, this is Mr. Red Fox speaking, and I'm going to be talking about how I feel about, well, Borderlands 3. This is just my general thoughts about the game. I'm not going to go into the plot or, any real gameplay details. These are just my overall feelings about the game thus far. So, I've put about 27 hours into the title, and I'm just going to say this right now. Borderlands 3 is kind of a misnomer to call it Borderlands 3 because the game essentially plays like Borderlands 2.5. Allegedly, Gearbox had been working on this game for 8 years. It does not feel like it. This game should be drastically more impressive about what was going on in it than what is currently going on in it, if you get my drift. What I mean to say is this game basically feels like they took the gameplay additions from Borderlands Borderlands the pre-sequel, and then basically said, okay, that's cool. So what we're going to do right now is, and just kind of sort of move that a little bit further, with the little micro steps forward. The game does not feel like a substantial, evolution of the formula, if you will. And I know what some people are going to say. They're going to say, well, I disagree. And I say this as someone who's played a lot of Borderlands. I played the pre-sequel. I didn't really like it. Not that the gameplay wasn't good. I just didn't like playing as Handsome Jack or his crew of assholes. But I know some people did like that. Some people did like the pre-sequel. I enjoyed Borderlands 2 and the first Borderlands. Bought those games when they came out. So I've been a fan of the franchise, but I'm not a huge fan of Borderlands, the pre-sequel. But with all that being said, this game is just not very, how can I put this? It doesn't feel like it is really moving the franchise forward, and substantially. I mean, there are some additions, like you can have 2 action skills instead of 1. That's cool. You can, let's see, what else? And you can basically go up, you can basically haul yourself up ledges, and that's cool. But it doesn't really do anything really different or new with the franchise. And aside from that, there's no real differences in how enemies are defeated or even fight. Sniping is a little bit better than it was in previous installments, but I mean, for what you essentially were doing in the original Borderlands games, you're not really seeing it in this one. You're not seeing an evolution of the formula. And I know what some people are going to say. Well, what do you mean? Nothing has substantially changed is what I'm saying. You're not seeing anything done differently. Case in point, look at other games that have a third installment. There's been a lot of changes over each installment. Even if it's just refinement of gameplay, there's still been changes. I'm going to use Metroid Prime as an example, because Metroid Prime is a Metroidvania where you gain new skills and abilities and become more powerful as time goes on and all that cool stuff, right? The first Metroid Prime was almost a one-for-one redo of Super Metroid in terms of the gameplay structure. Metroid Prime 2 was kind of like taking things from Link to the Past, right? And then Metroid Prime 3 is really much one, in my opinion, is kind of a refinement of the game of the gameplay concepts. Like, you're doing a lot of new stuff that you just didn't do in other games. And I like that on a personal level. I think that's a good thing in terms of games. But you know, I mean, you know, those games didn't have an 8-year development cycle between each game. Like, I think Metroid Prime 2 Echoes was almost in development as soon as, like, within a year of the release of the first Metroid Prime. And Metroid Prime 3 Corruption came out, I think, 4 or 5 years after the Metroid Prime 2 Echoes, but it had been worked on for that long. So there had been a lot of changes, but there's like literally nothing going on with this game that's really like, oh, well, they did something brand new. You know, case in point, I have some gameplay here. Like, I would have to tell you that this is BorderLands 3. I mean, yeah, you have the like, you have an attack that you can do. Your melee attacks are a little bit more powerful, but I mean, gameplay-wise, it really does feel like the same thing. Like, it doesn't feel like there was a substantial amount of trying to make this game better. But, you know,
you couldn't hit a
it is what it is.
with
My
a
own personal
banjo.
thing.
Any more for the meat grinder?
That being said, you know, tell me how you feel. Give me your thoughts and opinions. Do you agree? Do you disagree? That this game was, that BorderLands 3 is a substantial improvement over the base formula of BorderLands. Did they add anything new? So in the next segment, I'll talk about some new things I wish they would have added to this game after the cut. So here are just some new gameplay concepts I wish BorderLands 3 had. I wish that the game had, and I've said this before, I wish they had a character who was a pure melee class. I think that would have been interesting, because they have tons of guns, and your characters can do a melee attack, but it's like, you really can't main a melee class. I think that would have been interesting to have a class that just focused on melee combat. Interesting concept. Now, they've had characters that they kind of teased you might be a melee class, but then you get it and it's like, oh wait, no, it's just, you know, their action skill is a melee ability or some shit. It just doesn't, like Zero or Mordecai in the first game and Zero from the second game. Kind of lame. Also, I wish that the game had made sniping a little bit more organic. One of my major problems with this title is that when you snipe enemies, it really doesn't, like, yeah, you might snipe a few unaware enemies, but then once they recognize you, these dudes are on your ass like no one's business. Now here's the thing, okay? If you play any other game that has sniping, characters are gonna be fucking, like, you know...
says there are only 3 things harder than Verkuvian ham. Diamond boron,
scuttling, trying not to get shot. You know, they're not going to be like, oh man, aiming, like this almost magical, preternatural way to get your ass. And ironically, even though the environments are, like, there's, like, you're going to different planets and there's different, like, spots where you can go, the game, ironically, doesn't really, a lot of the environments don't feel as large as what you had in BorderLands 2, which is weird, I know, but, you know, for a game that's been in development for that long, it really doesn't feel like it sometimes. So, you know, but that's just my own personal opinion. So, I'll give the conclusion after the cut, and we'll, tell you what's coming up for this week in the next segment. So here's my conclusion. Basically, I think that Borderlands 3 is overall a relatively good game. Is it perfect? No. I think that it doesn't take enough steps forward to feel like the third installment to the series. Yes, I know story-wise it is, but in terms of, the depth of the characters and how they're doing stuff, the game doesn't really feel like, oh wow, they did something new and different. I know some people will disagree, and that's their opinion, they're allowed to have it, but that's how I feel. You can agree to disagree, or agree to disagree, or disagree to agree, whatever. But basically, I just don't feel that the game makes enough changes in order to say, wow, this warrants being called the third one. It doesn't really feel like it's made enough. It's not. I mean, and this is my own personal opinion. I don't think it's nearly as polished as Borderlands 3 was. The side missions aren't as interesting. The characters aren't as well defined. And I know this is the third game in the series, and a lot of people, if you're a Borderlands fan, you've been a Borderlands fan. You're on board no matter what, but it just doesn't really. I'm not feeling it. So that's my own opinion. We will be covering this. Our podcast is being moved this Saturday from Saturday to Friday. So same time, just it's on a Friday. So the Wednesday cast is the same. So with that being said, that's been the podcast. Remember, rate, comment, share, subscribe, all that jazz. If you would like to get in touch with the channel, you can reach me via Gmail at mrredfoxbsbuster@gmail.com, or at Twitter at Matthew Wesley at mrredfox91 on Twitter. So there you go. That's the end of the podcast. Sorry, that's the end of the video. Remember, rate, comment, share, subscribe. Peace and good night.